Hey everybody, it's Conscious Medium Brandon Ross with another episode of Always Be Conscious. What to talk about this time? How about the phenomenon called quiet quitting? Is it an act of defiance? Is it a generational mishap? Or is it an act of consciousness? We're about to pick apart the big three reasons why quiet quitting is becoming a new way to express your consciousness. All right, everybody, this is one of those fantastic, phenomenal things that on the surface looks like a generational snafu and an anti-disestablishmentarianism, one of my favorite words of all time. But what it really is an elevation of consciousness. Hey, everybody, I'm Conscious Medium Brandon Ross. Those of you that have known me for a long time are basically my parents. However, if you've known me in a previous life, you knew that I was a corporate recruiter. You knew that I might have placed you in a job or someone that you know. And if you were in one of the areas that I worked with or one of the largest companies in the world, I was their exclusive person. Well, time changes, right? Having my hand in human resources for much of my adult career, it actually allowed me to use my intuition on a daily basis. I wasn't just interviewing people, I was reading them. By the way, my book comes out, and I'd love you all to pick it up. Funny you should say that is a fantastic tale about how I became a medium, about the things that happened to me. I've got some great tales about recruiter-style situations where I was able to use my gift. You won't be disappointed. Anyways, one of the things that we would always look at in the recruiting industry, particularly the staffing industry, is we would begin to take a look at how and why people would leave their jobs. Now, some of it as a recruiter was to figure out when people were going to leave and get a jump on the company so that then we can get the placement and make the money. But there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. However, when I moved more into the, hey, let me help you retain these people side of things as a consultant, a few of the things that I noticed were things that were trending in a way that could be fixable or at least identifiable. What I'm actually talking about is culture, things like drive and things like want and will to actually perform. All of those factors made me very curious about how the world works. It actually showed me quite a bit about intuition and what life path work really looks like. It's part of the reason why I quit my day-to-day work, had my Jerry Maguire moment, held up my goldfish and said, "Who's coming with me?" By the way, nobody came with me. However, what is happening now is something that I faced at the end of my career. I had actually built up a really great portfolio. I had a fantastic business and I could kind of sit back and not really do anything. And I was driven. And when you think about this, most people in this country are really driven to perform. From a young age, we are really kind of pushed in a way to be able to substantiate our worth through what we're able to do for others, do for a company. So when I was kind of done with that industry, I did what I felt was the right thing, which was, well, quit. I decided to get myself a small consulting gig, help a company on the side, be able to pay my bills and just leave. Well, I walked away from a pretty regular, staggering paycheck, and all I had to do was show up. The idea of just showing up and coasting, which is what we used to call it back then, was something that didn't really set well with me because regardless of the fact that I was drawing towards consciousness, the idea of that felt like stealing. By the way, this is part of the reason why people like Kevin O'Leary hate quiet quitting, because his expectation is that you are working 9 to 5, more like 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., get a couple of minutes of shut-eye, and then get back right away. This is the Bill Parcells idea. If you're not 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late. This is also the idea as to why we get burned out. Once upon a time, in American culture anyways, you could start at a job at, say, 20, 25, and stay there until you were 60, 65. It would give you a great, big, amazing retirement party. You would get a gold watch, maybe a car, maybe a trip around the world, whatever. But those days are far gone. Part of the reason is because that company, whichever company it is that you work for, wouldn't bat an eyelash at replacing you by 2 o'clock this afternoon if you quit first thing in the morning. And I can guarantee you will be replaced by Monday. The idea that companies have us conditioned as workers is to think that we're all replaceable. This planted a very fertile soil for post-pandemic attitudes. Now, quiet quitting isn't necessarily new, but it has been named different things. And just for a matter of record, it's not really quitting at all. It's actually a set of boundaries in reconciling the expectation of what is given to you versus what you perform. It is often in American culture, in American workplaces, that you are expected to go above and beyond because that's what makes you a good employee. And then at the end of the day, you're the one that's left holding the pieces. By the way, these things have led to things like burnout, disassociation, depression, and leads to things like mental health breakdowns, addictions, you name it. So is this actually a break in the cycle? Let's take a look. Number 2, performance. Well, performance is one of those age-old things that there really is a set of qualities that kind of come along with it. If you are at the exact same pay grade as somebody else next to you, why does it make sense that you do all the creative stuff and they get to sit there and just push the pencils back and forth and say it's the same thing? At some point you get a little bit frustrated or you move ahead. Some people take pride in that, and it's really an exercise in ego when someone is outperforming the other people around you. Well, what happens when you get hit by a lightning bolt and you suddenly say, that's it, I get it. I don't have to do the same amount and I get paid the same as this yahoo next to me? Performance is actually red flagged when people have severe drop-offs in their performance. It's also deadline driven, and they will turn in the work at the last possible second. Oh, and the last thing about performance is you just simply know they're not performing. Well, the energetic value of this is once again about boundaries. The boundary that's coming in actually talks about you not appreciating their level. On a spiritual basis, you're not aligned with this worker. This worker isn't aligned with the space that they're in. This could go in an overarching belief system or even into the job itself. I'll explain a little bit. If you sit in an interview and the interviewer says, we do a lot of great things here. We do a lot of charity work. We believe in working with the community. And we truly, truly believe in work-life balance. That one's complete BS. By the way, a workplace's job is not to give you a work-life balance. It's meant to give you a salary so you can do whatever the freak you want when you're not there. Let that sink in for a second. But if you're sold a bill of goods at the top of the hour, and by somewhere about halfway through your career, you look around and you do one charity event a year, and it's the walkathon for whoever's cousin's brother's uncle got sick that year, and all of a sudden you create one charity event thing and you might be able to do an office pool or a collection in another. That's not called a core-based belief system. That's called Susie and HR had a good idea. And nobody had the courage to say that's stupid. I'm talking down to it for this reason. Companies really don't care whether you're charitable, and for you to be an incorporated piece of a cog like this, they had better show it on a regular basis. This type of disenfranchised with performance is that you're not aligned with what the core beliefs of the company are. At the top of every hour, when you first start with the job, they should start with saying, this is how we're going to make money today. Could you imagine that? If they literally say that? By the way, you know what types of companies say that at the top of the hour? Really, really successful ones. But then again, they also have a lot of turnover. Because once you get your money, your value has already decreased, and why do you stay? You can make a lot of money, but don't you want to do something else with it? By the way, that's the reason why companies will create people that have profiles that talk about entrepreneurship. I'm running your company through my desk, but it's really my company. By the way, this quiet quitting is people saying, I came here for a job. I'm not an alpha with this. I don't need to be a type A personality to make you happy. And then all of a sudden, what happens is that the person becomes a little bit happier because they're not as engaged. They don't find the definition of the company with their personal identity. That's one to sink in for a second, because that's consciousness. They don't need the codependency of a company to find their identity. Number 3, consciousness. By the way, this is the employee that is really quiet for a reason. Now, some of you think that they're just kind of mailing it in because of the other 2 subjects that I talked about. But what is really going on is they're observing. They're learning. Maybe they're a change agent for consciousness. They're not going to fall prey to being someone that works so hard after hours, getting texted all night, emails first thing in the morning, and they stay in the conscious lane and they simply observe. What's happening is that you are getting a guru experience from this person, and hiring managers, firing managers, and anyone else that might be responsible for replacing them, pay attention. There's a reason that this is triggered. First and foremost, they may be on a path of enlightenment and you might want to get to know them because they're clearly ascending. They're good people to have in your back pocket as you yourself elevate. Second of all, they might be able to glean key insights with sheer honesty. They're typically the most authentic people in the room. This is where the elevation of consciousness really truly comes in. When Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2007, it started to rip apart a lot of the lexicon of who and what we are in terms of structure, particularly with money. When someone goes in the conscious lane of quiet quitting, what is actually happening is they're showing you that this is a dire change that you could make and make your company more viable. It could also show you that your company isn't viable at all. Uh-oh. One of the other dynamics about this as well is that from a spiritual standpoint, they are a guru. They understand what their boundaries are, and they have no problem enacting them, and they're also immune to the consequence. Oof. Kind of makes someone dangerous, doesn't it? From a socioeconomic standpoint, this is why Gen Xers kind of got pinned with the quiet quitting part of it. It's really not a Gen X thing at all. It's actually a consciousness thing and an awareness thing. When you start to say, why am I putting myself through this? Have you ever been at a job and your boss comes out and just starts yelling at you and you were kind of teetering for a little bit? You're going to quit or at least make a plan to get the hell out of there. You might mail it in, you might do whatever. This quiet quitting isn't really new. You know what else isn't new? Quiet firing. Yeah, I went ahead and said it. Whether you realize it or not, there's always a plan for your seat. Maybe you're not quite up to snuff. I mean, after all, you're sitting in a manager's meeting and they're saying, why is your performance numbers always this? And you look down at your team and you say, yeah, this one here, we gotta figure out a plan. I don't have a reason to fire them today, but I'm going to build a case, don't worry. And then I'm going to kind of look for somebody else that kind of is the right fit. The cultural fit that we're looking for. Somebody that wants to get ahead in the cultural fit that, you know, somebody will pick up the phone at 7 o'clock at night because we have an emergency and answer an email because our client is the most important thing ever. And by the way, people are our greatest resources and our greatest asset. And we believe in the home work-life balance because we believe that you should work at home. That conscious being looked at you and said, I'm sorry, I'm busy. By the way, don't ever discount that people that are conscious have a tendency of actually having more than one job. That conscious lane, don't forget, had value. You hired them. But also recognize that they probably outgrew you. That's the person you want to find. If you're a company worth your salt, you want the people around you to grow and eventually outgrow you, either with you or without you, and not have any ego to it. The idea that somebody would be chastised for quiet quitting really misses the opportunity. And you want to talk about a karmic value? The staffing industry is a $500 billion a year industry. I know, I had a chunk of that at one point. And I'm here to tell you that that is the karmatic lesson for these companies. The fact that people are able to label it and begin to discuss it is your opportunity, corporate America, capitalist society, alpha male ego shit, to get it right. You can begin to learn on this and actually understand what consciousness is through the work that you're doing. Now, it's difficult. There are several of us counselors out there, those consultants. One of the things that you really have to take a look at, though, is what is the soul of the company? Do you actually understand what your mission is? And if your mission is to make money, please own it. Get rid of the superfluous stuff. Figure out why it is that you make money, what makes you good, and what is valued. There are economic pressures here. You should provide something that is valued somewhere. Forget about the consciousness for a second. Are you viable? You can get to the conscious level when you have the opportunity to have people in your organization that literally sit there and say, this is the reason why I don't want to do this. Have difficult conversations. Because if not, you're sitting there just doing the quiet firing while they're doing the quiet quitting. It really does work both ways, and that is the reason why it's an opportunity to grow. The exit interview is one of the worstly, I just make up words, one of the worst kept secrets and worst executed function of your employment. Most people just don't want to hear it. Like, yeah, we don't find value in that anymore. By the way, there is a consciousness in that. You're not willing to hear the tough parts of your breakup? Let's sink in for a second. But for companies that are beginning to do that, for companies that are beginning to listen to what leads to things like burnout, can share some compassion. By the way, you become a better organization and you'll want to go to work. The idea that we don't love our work and we complain about it is staggering. You spend 1/3 of your entire life plus doing a job. If you don't love it, you hate 1/3 of your life. That is impactful. That is the reason why people are frustrated. That is why the get-rich-quick schemes are so prevalent. That is the reason why pyramid systems, come into play. That is the reason why people see things flashy and do things for money that they wouldn't otherwise be compromised doing because they just want to get theirs. Consciousness won't allow it. The greater good is coming in. Whether we realize it or not, this is an effort that is going to be difficult. Our business leaders have a responsibility to understand that the task that we are meant to do has to have value aligned with what our soul's purpose is. And if your 9-to-5 job is simply about money, then understand that that person needs to take that and find their soul purpose beyond that. Maybe they develop and they deliver readings. Maybe they do spiritual counseling. Maybe they do yoga. Maybe they are Reiki master teachers, or maybe they just teach an after-school program. You had better find time to allow them to find their passions as well, or you will be spending $500 billion a year on an industry that is preying on your inadequacies to understand why you are not aligned. How about that for a punchline? All right, everybody. This is Conscious Medium Brandon Ross, and thank you again for joining me for another episode of Always Be Conscious. I'm going to give everybody the heart tap to remind you to simply keep going. We love and care for one another, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care. Be conscious.